Namaste students, welcome back to your history class. We were studying about the ancient civilization of the world. We studied about the Egyptian civilization and also the Mesopotamian civilization in the last two classes. Today let us continue with the next civilization, that is the Chinese civilization. Children, as we all know, China is a vast country with a huge range of terrains and climates. Within its mountains, deserts, and coastlands, and above all, the great river system of China. We are having the Yellow River towards the north, and the Yangtze towards the south. All these have helped the shape Chinese civilization. Now let us move on to the Yellow River region. The civilization of the ancient China first developed in the Yellow River region of northern China in the 3rd and 2nd BCE. This is a very fertile region. However, the land needs irrigation to make the crops grow and well-built river embankments to prevent catastrophic flooding. In ancient time, the main crop in North China was millet, a food still grown in many parts of the world as a major crop. This region is regarded as the cradle of Chinese civilization. It was here the earliest Chinese dynasties were based. Throughout the throughout the ancient period of China's history, it formed the heart of the Chinese world, and it was from here the Chinese civilization spread across the rest of China. Next, we are having here the Yangtze Valley region to the south or towards the south. So, to the south, we have the great Yangtze Valley. With its warm, wet climate, was the first area in the world where rice was grown sometimes before 5000 BCE. Rice is one of the most nutritious plants in the world. From this region, rice cultivation spread far and wide across the southern China and into the Southeast Asia. For much of the ancient times, the Yangtze region remained outside the Chinese culture area. However, from about 7000 BCE, the kingdoms and people here began to be gradually absorbed into the Chinese world. So the Chinese only expanded into the mountains and coastal lands of southern China in the later ancient period, after the rest of the China had been unified by under the rule of emperors. It remained a large frontiers region until the late centuries. The Chinese civilization was no expectation to this, but the river which led to the establishment of Chinese civilization was known as Chinese Sorrow. This was the Huanghe River. After the floods this river changed its course in an unpredictable manner and inundated houses and agricultural lands. It would render all the canals useless. This was the reason the people of this area are referred to the symbol of sorrow. According to the archaeological sources, the first dynasty which ruled the first dynasty which ruled here was the Shang dynasty. It ruled in the period Shang dynasty. This is the Shang dynasty children, which ruled over the Chinese civilization. It ruled in the period between the 18th century BCE and the 12th century BCE. Under the rule of this dynasty, the people had developed a wonderful culture by the 14th century. The Shang dynasty was overpowered by the neighboring Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty continued the good traditions of the Shang culture and ruled it till 250 BCE. Two families ruled China for the next 1500 years. First, the Shang family ruled, and then the Zhou family ruled. Life continued in pretty much the same way of the people during both the dynasty. In the in the Zhou dynasty, there was a section of officials below the kings. The king's children, he allotted the portion of lands to the officials. In return, the officials, what they had to do, they had to support the kings when the war took place. So, in the social stratification, the communities in the next level were the merchants and the craftsmen. Apart from them, we can also find a majority of peasants as well. In the lower strata of the social hierarchy were the slaves. The prisoners of wars were made as the slaves of the king. So, beginning around 1100 BC, children, the Zhou rulers of China ruled for China for several years, the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty is divided into two periods. One is the West Zhou. The kings ruled from Ayan in a peaceful period. Later, conflict arose. The kings moved towards the east to Luoyang, beginning of the Eastern Zhou period. When we see the government, when Zhou conquered Shang, leaders worried Chinese people would not accept them. They introduced the ideas that they were ruled by the mandate of heaven. Gods would support just the ruler, not allow anyone to corrupt to hold the power. And in the dynastic cycle, Zhou said Shang was overthrown because they lost the god's favor. Later, rules used the mandate of heaven to explain the dynastic cycle, a rise and fall of the dynasties in China. If dynasty lost the power, it obviously had been corrupt. In that case, they said it was the will of the gods that the dynasty be overthrown and a new one take power. Can you recognize this picture what it is? Yeah, it is a Great Wall of China. The Chinese Empire consisted of many small provinces. 7 big states were created, bringing the smaller provinces under them. Every state that was ruled, created, thus constructed a wall along its boundary for its protection. Emperor Qin Shi Huang Tai ordered that the walls of the northern Chinese state be connected. This enabled the northern walls to ward off the attacks of the invaders from the north. The construction of the Great Wall began in the 7th century BCE, and it continued till the 16th century. The ornate parts were repaired and repaired and strengthened. When the work was completed, it stretched to more than 1,500 kilometers and it is one of the seven wonders of the world. Let us know more about this. The Great Wall of China. The Great Wall of China is a series of fortifications that were built across the historical northern borders of ancient Chinese state and imperial China as protection against the various nomadic groups from the Eurasian steppe. Several walls were built as early as the 7th century with selective structures later joined by Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. Little of the Qin wall remains. Later on, many successive dynasties built and maintained the multiple structures of border walls. The most well-known sections of the wall were built by the Ming dynasty during the period of 1368 to 1644. Apart from defense, other purposes of the Great Wall was included border controls. Secondly, allowing the imposition of duties on goods transported along the Silk Road. Thirdly, regulation or encouragement of trade and control of immigration and emigration. Fourthly, the defensive characteristics of the Great Wall were enhanced by the construction of watchtowers, troop barracks, garrison stations, signaling capabilities through the means of smoke or fire, and the fact the path of the Great Wall also served as a transportation corridor. The frontier walls built by different dynasties have multiple courses. Collectively, they stretch from Liaodong in the east to Lo Lake in the west, from the present day Sino-Russian border in the north to Teo River in the south along an arc that roughly delineates the edge of the Mongolian steppes spanning over 20,000 kilometers, 20,000 kilometers in total. Today, the defensive system of the Great Wall is generally recognized as one of the most impressive architectural feats in the history. The Shang, this is about the Great Wall, children. The Shang king spent quite an amount of time in the conquest and battles. Hence, the army was in prominence. The soldiers enjoyed a dignified place in the society. Soldiers wore bronze helmets and metal armoras. The bronze daggers, axes, bows, and iron-tipped arrows have been also been found. And the people of Shang dynasty they were dependent on agriculture. They had a well-organized system of irrigation. As I told, the rice was grown first in China. So it is Proclean. It is believed that Proclean originated in China. Semi-Proclean objects were in the use from 1600 BCE by the time of reign of Han dynasty. Chinese used to bury their dead bodies along the Proclean pots, animals, and the objects loved most during their lives. The Chinese, the type of dresses they used to wear, let us see. The Chinese, they used to wear thin cotton dresses. They use silk also, and they were also one more occupation was silk worm rearing. Silk manufacturing was one of the most important industry during this time. They used to make excellent pots, and they also had learned to make various objects from Proclean. It was a custom of the Chinese to worship their ancestors. And they believed the dead man became a spirit and that the spirit had special powers. So the dead bodies was buried along the tombs, along with the various wooden articles, pots, bronze vessels, and other objects. The tombs of the kings used to be quite large. The Chinese tradition of writing began with the pictures and got transformed into the ideographic script. Writers used to write on silk and bamboo slips. Proclaim and the Great Walls are the exceptional contributions of this culture, children. So, in this chapter, what we all learned, let us recapture. We studied about the Egyptian civilization. It originated, where did it originated? It on the river Nile. Huge pyramids, sculptures, temples, and inscriptions in these temples tells us about the Egyptians' culture and history. And we also studied about the hieroglyphics, that is the sacred writings. It consists of small drawings which has been written. And we also saw that we also studied about the pyramid, how it was built. And pharaoh means a person who lives in a palatial house. The kings of Egypt were called as pharaohs, and they also believed that man had to give an account of his deeds on earth to Osiris, the most powerful god of life and death. And we also studied about the Mesopotamian civilization. Mesopotamian civilization lies in between the two rivers. Which are those two rivers, children? Yeah, Euphrates and Tigris. And also we also see that for centuries who entered into the fertile land, the Sumerians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and Persians, they used the cuneiform type of writing. And we also see that the Akkadian dynasty and also the Assyria dynasty which ruled over, and also the hanging gardens which was built at Babylonia. And we also studied about the laws of Hammurabi. So, the main source of the law code of Hammurabi are the rock edicts which have been found, and the Hammurabi's law enforced the logic of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And we also studied today about the Chinese civilization, where Chinese civilization is also known as China's sorrow. This was the Huanghe River we studied, where it took place, the civilization. And we also studied about the Shang dynasty, how it overpowered by the Zhou dynasty. And we also studied about the Great Wall of China. So, with this we end up with the chapter, the ancient civilization of the world. Thank you, children.